agenda. This meeting is open for public attendance. You may also watch the meeting remotely via live stream. Agenda item 2, we have meeting opening and roll call. Roll call and verification of quorum. Lynette?
Ms. Bushman.
Here.
Mr. Robbie.
Here.
Ms. Portson.
Here.
Ms. Erler.
Here.
Mr. Pope.
Here.
Mr. Kowalski.
Here.
Mr. Summers.
Here.
Mr. Lepak.
Here.
Mr. Shetter.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Lynette. If we can please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Agenda item 4, public comments. Members of the public may provide comment pertaining only to specific items on the agenda in person or via email. Lynette, did we get any emailed comments?
No emails and no.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5, presentations. We have our communication report with Sarah O'Donnell.
Hello and thank you. A few changes to the communication report since we are entering a new school year, so that's exciting. If you want to go to the next slide. Or scroll down. I think it might be a PDF in there, sorry.
Oh boy.
Here we go.
Can't go that fast.
Oh, this is so awful.
So the first thing I wanted to touch on a little bit tonight was our media coverage and public relations that we did. Typically what I do is give you some numbers about like how far we've had that reach, how many engagements we've had. In the efforts of cost saving, I've taken a look at our budget to see where we can cut and had a good conversation with Superintendent and President Bushman and made the decision that that's not something that we're finding to be specifically beneficial to myself or to the board. So we've gone away from those numbers, and instead what I'll be reporting on is press releases that we've issued, any public relations work that we've done, and then where we've received coverage. So over the course of July, we did have very nice coverage from Stevens Point Journal, Point Plover, Metro Wire, WSAW, and WSAU. Social media engagement for the month of July, we saw an increase in both the total audiences for our Facebook and Instagram district pages. Slight bump, but I'll take a slight bump for July. We did see a decrease month over month in both impressions and engagements, which is not surprising. July, there's just, we do our best to still share a lot of content, but folks are off doing all of the great fun things that there are to do in Wisconsin in July. So we fully expect to see that rebound, specifically during back to school. For website and digital, website use was also down in July. Again, this is not surprising. We will see that rebound for August and into September before we see a little dip in October. The top day of the week, I thought that was fun to take a peek and see when people are looking at the website was Thursday. I don't know why. Top devices used were the iPhone, followed by Chrome, and then Safari for browsers. Trending pages, no surprises there. Welcome back to school, the district landing page, and then the SPASH academic guide. In terms of working on the new website build, we got the updated navigation across all district and school sites. We've templated the school landing pages and the calendar pages. I'm really excited that we will have shareable calendars for families, so they'll be able to download and add to their own calendars. The academic calendar, 6-day rotation and days off. So hopefully that makes it easier for families to help, just keep track of what's going on. Creation of staff resources intranet. So we'll take all of those things that are really staff facing and tuck those behind a wall where folks will have to log in. And then we continue to move through our training and content updates. For our special projects and campaigns, in July we added the district brand kit to Canva. I'm really excited about this. I went through and did every single school, all of their district approved logos and district approved colors. So as they are creating flyers or creating different pieces that are either public facing or student facing, it's very easy for them to grab what they need to have those be really nicely branded. We finalized our Every Student, Every Day Beyond Expectations back to school kickoff video. I'm really excited to share that with the community, as well as welcome back just some good things for staff as they come back. That is tied into that branding. And then we improved our back to school information campaign. This year we went with both a print and digital. So if you have students in the district, you received a postcard last week, just reminding folks with a link right to that website, right to the back to school information. I saw last year just kind of across Facebook, I think sometimes people still, no matter how much we push it, it's nice to have that piece in your hand just reminding you that school is coming up. I'm excited to share I've been named president-elect for the Wisconsin School Public Relations Association. I want to thank Lori for her support in that area. We also completed the School Communications Academy, which is for superintendents and other communications folks across the state in partnership with WASDA, WISPRA, and the Donovan Group. And then we have 2 upcoming presentations, one for WASDA about just working with superintendents and trying to help them with strategies specific to managing critical incidents. We find we get asked a lot for that. And then Corey's going to join me at WISPRA talking about collaboration for success between school communicators and superintendents. We find a lot of our folks are looking for some help in that area. Looking ahead through August, which feels like it is over, even though I know it is not. Back to school family engagement, so continue to work on that comprehensive back to school campaign, making sure that families are receiving that information. We continue to push that information with principals back. We've been doing a lot of work with principals to help get those newsletters ready and out. Internal engagement, again, that kickoff information, having that ready for staff, finding ways for them to engage. We shared some Find Your Why campaign today, hoping that some folks will take advantage of that to help share and celebrate really why our folks are excited to work here and work with kids. And then just continuing to focus on content creation, just aimed at covering as much of many of the stories that we can. That's it for me.
Questions or comments for Sarah? I'm excited about the shareable calendar.
Yes,
right?
me
As
too.
I will have like someone in elementary, a student in junior high and high school, so to be able to have that in one place is, I'm sure other parents are going to be grateful too. So thank you.
Excellent.
All right, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Sarah.
And we'll move into the superintendent's report with Corey Hirschbrenner.
Thank you, Jen. I'm going to ask Chris to take care of the first agenda item. He wants to introduce one of our new principals to the board and share a little bit about him, and then I'll jump back to my items. So
Okay,
Chris.
sure, and I'm going to just take a quick moment. I know Cole was kind enough to make his way around the table already this evening and introduce himself, but I wanted to, for any community members that might be joining us, just take a minute to introduce and welcome Cole Irish to the leadership team. Cole will be serving as our new principal at McDill Elementary School. Cole completed his undergraduate studies at University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point and his graduate studies in educational leadership at UW River Falls. Prior to joining us here in Stevens Point, Cole served as a 5th grade teacher in Rosholt, and most recently served as the principal at Burnham Wood Wittenberg School District. So thank you for joining us, Cole, tonight, and we're glad you're here.
Welcome, Cole.
Thanks. Thanks, Cole.
I'm impressed you memorized all of that. Like, that was impressive.
Brilliant.
That was your resume right there, right?
I'll follow you around if you want.
Okay. Next, I want to thank Lynette for being here with us tonight. Carlin is not able to be here, so Lynette's taking her place tonight. So thank you, Lynette. I appreciate you very much. Yep.
You're doing a nice job.
Yes.
We are.
Yes. We are only 9 minutes into the board meeting.
Summer school update. We had a really good summer school this summer. We had 2,730 students, and they were enrolled in over 5,000 courses. So I'd like to thank Jen Melville, Darla Panoski, the Ed Services Department, the HR Department, food service, transportation, all of the staff that teach, and just anyone that was involved with summer school. So thank you very, very much. Next, I just wanted to update the board. We did have a reunification training last week with our entire leadership team. So it was cabinet, all of our principals, Bliss staff, and student support staff. It was a really, really good training. It's one that we'll continue to do on an annual basis. So we're continuing to update, all of our kits that are at our reunification site, the communication plan, and Jeff and Chris Budzinski are going to start pulling that safety and security team back together to kind of put a roadmap out of what we need to do and who's responsible for what each month of the year. So we're all consistent district-wide. So Jeff has really taken on additional responsibilities with safety and security, and he's doing a phenomenal job. So thanks, Jeff, with that also. Next, just a few updates about this coming school year. So our new staff actually start this week on Thursday. They'll be with us Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday. We have 43 new staff members to date. Board members are invited to attend on Monday, the 19th at 8 o'clock at Mid-State Technical College. So if you're able to be there, please just come to Mid-State and we'll introduce you as a board member to all of our new staff members. Beginning of the year in service for all staff then is August 23rd, 26th, 27th, and 28th. The 29th date is only for students that are entering a new building. So any kindergarten student, 7th grade student, or 10th grade student reports that day so that they can kind of learn how the building runs, meet the staff. Junior high kids are really nervous about lockers, so they spend a lot of time learning how to unlock their locker. And then the first day for all other students, including kindergarten, 7th and 10th graders, is on September 3rd, the Tuesday after the holiday. As I had indicated, we have 43 new staff. We have 3 teaching positions currently unfilled that the HR department and principals are working diligently to fill. And we have several special ed EA positions open. So
What are those staff?
What are those staff? Correct me if I'm wrong, Beth, but I believe it is Spanish, 2nd grade, and school counselor. Yep. In addition, Portage County Business Council does the partners, or the PI event, Partners in Education. That event is August 20th at the Portage County Business Council from 5 to 7. So if you're interested in attending, please let Carlyn know ASAP so that she can register you for that event. 2 additional items. SPASH Athletic Hall of Fame is September 21st at Century World again. If you are interested in attending that, please also let Carlyn know ASAP so she can get you registered for that event as well. The last item, I'm going to turn it over to G and Ted. They attended a workshop recently that they shared some information with actually Brian and I on, and they'd just like to talk a little bit about a few highlights that they learned from that event, and then we can move on about the agenda.
Gee, I'm going to go first. It was held Friday and Saturday, and it was put on by the Wisconsin Association of School Board Members, 2-day event in Green Bay. And so there were 16 sessions that were available to us, and G and I split them up. And so we never duplicated in any of the sessions except for the keynote. For the ones I attended, which were really instructive for the training, responding to school threats originating from internet media, ransomware attacks in your school, teaching with AI, navigating cyber insurance without getting schooled. It was interesting. I met with Brian Casey afterwards and talked about it. And for the different things that I learned in the training, our school district is ahead of the curve in what's going on around the state. And it's reassuring to hear that, too. Good job, Casey. Some more sessions that were on the following day that we split them up. More cyber risk exercises, strengthening your school's preparedness, and the one I really liked, of course, was the finance, going through the finance ones too, which were always good. So, but there was a lot of in-depth information. It was 2 full days. I encourage everyone who has an opportunity to attend these because it is worthwhile.
Thank you, Ted.
The ones I went to, we start off, the keynote speaker was about ChatGPT. And of course, I learned a ton of things. And I think I learned all kinds of new stuff. Then I ask other people, and they're already, oh yeah, I've been using that. I ask my kids, yeah, we use it all the time. But the amazing thing was, the guy said, well, load it on your phone right now. I said, really? And it's, yeah. It took about 10 seconds. He says, now do something. That was all the training that was necessary. And those of you that use it know that. So as, just to play around with it, I planned a 5-day vacation in the UP the last week of September. And 10 second it was on there. Tell me where to go, places to see, stuff like that. It was-
Restaurants to eat. Yeah.
What?
Where to eat.
Yeah, it was amazing. But of course, there are a lot of problems with that. The thing I remember about it was he said, everybody's got a supercomputer in their hand, why not use it? But then somebody brought it up in the crowd, said, but you don't know what they're on. You're holding the screen. He said, yeah, that was his concession was, yeah, everybody's got computers now in school. Use those, don't use the phone. That was interesting. Then the other one was all day Saturday I spent in talking about attendance with people from Appleton. They have their own attendance officer. They have 2 now. Talking about the things they do, and of course talking with Corey and Chris. We're already doing a lot of it. But it was interesting. They found a lot of success. They said 70% success, especially at the young age, getting those families in the idea that you need to go to school, because some families just don't have that. Okay, and then I wanted to mention resolutions. They're due September 15th at the very latest date if anybody's thinking about one. And the only legal thing I saw, and I might have mentioned it before, Act 10 is progressing. The challenge to Act 10 is progressing, and it's in legal land somewhere right now. Okay?
Wonderful.
So that's it.
Thank you, Gia.
Thanks, G and Ted.
It's just a question about do we have numbers about 4K in kindergarten, kind of what we're seeing this year, or is that something?
It's lower than what it has been the last couple years, but I don't have the
Most
number.
recently, and this is not going to be current as of today or even this week, it was 376.
Okay, and last year was,
We were slightly higher than that. We were about 392 or 398, if memory serves me correctly.
we've got a few more weeks,
Yeah.
right?
Yep, we got a few more weeks. Yeah.
All right.
We'll get there.
All right.
And typically, we do see a pretty significant increase in enrollment in these weeks right prior to the start of the school year. So I'm hopeful we'll be right back where we were last
Right.
year.
Thank you.
Impressive memory again. All right, moving on to agenda item 6, consent agenda. We have the minutes of the prior school board meeting from June 10th, 2024, the minutes of the school board retreat from June 24th, 2024, the minutes of the special school board meeting from July 16th, 2024, the approval of the schedule of monthly bills, and employment recommendations. I am looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Motion made by Dennis,
Second.
second by G. Okay, Lynette, can you please call roll, do the schedule of monthly bills?
Okay. Mr. Kowalski,
Aye.
Mr. Summers,
Aye.
Ms. Portson,
Yes.
Mr. Lepak,
Yes.
Mr. Shetter,
Aye.
Ms. Erler,
Yes.
Mr. Polk,
Yes.
Mr. Robbie.
Yep.
Ms. Bushman.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item 7, business services. We have the Business Services and Human Resources Committee report with our chair, Ted Kowalski.
Okay. Thank you, Jen. Okay, the first one there, we have the revision. Well, let's do this differently. I'm going to tell you about the information ones first, and then we'll talk, Mike, okay? So Dr. Owens did a couple of information reports for us. The first one was in-service training for the school board members that were present about why Wisconsin is organized into school districts and not parishes or some sort of different political organization. And it was a history lesson that helps us to see where we are today by what had happened in the past. And it was really well put together and thought-provoking. He also did an overview of the revenue limit and equalization aid. And frankly, that information was as hard to absorb as it was for me to say.
full of jokes today.
But it was informative, and this is information that's good for us to hear so that we understand what's going on. And so the information was really well received, and I appreciate you bringing that forward. Dr. Owens also did a enrollment analysis for the last 10 years. And this was interesting, and this dovetailed, I think G went to one at training about in Green Bay about the fluctuation, or maybe it was at the keynote, fluctuation in enrollment across the state. And they were talking about the downward motion that enrollment across Wisconsin is for school districts. One of the things they pointed out there is it's going to go up and it's going to go down, but some areas are going to do better than others. Dr. Owens' report actually makes it look like, from the information, of course it's not a projection because you can't tell from past information where we're going, but things look positive, or at least not nearly as dire as they do for some other districts. And so while across the state enrollments are going down, for us locally, things are on an even keel at this point, and we'll know more as we go further into it. And so, thank you for that report also. For the business report, okay, Mike, I think that we were on you, if you would please.
Yeah, so I'm bringing the 2023-24 budget revisions
There we go.
to the board. The majority of the revisions are due to grants and carryover. So we have state and federal project grants that when you adopt the budget in October, we don't have all the information for those grants at that time. And so things tend to happen where we might have an increase in revenue for a grant, but then we also have an increase in a matching expense. So the overall impact to the budget, well, there really isn't one. They zero out. We did have one exception this year, and we don't typically have something like this happen, but we had a grant where we had to increase the revenue, and then we increased the expense by not as much as the revenue. So that did have a slight impact on the budget. But it was a positive impact, and that was something that DPI had us do. That grant was out of balance, and we had to fix it. But other than that, any of the other changes really didn't have an impact. We do this every year in August, and we bring this to the board, and I'm seeking your approval. But first, are there any questions?
Are there any questions? It is, as Mike says, we'll be looking for a motion for this.
Can
Yep.
you identify the change? I see the column that says change.
Oh, yeah.
What is the amount?
That's a good question. So if you look at the table, there is an adopted budget column, amended budget column, and change. And so where you see the change is when you look at the ending fund balance. That's the third row down. So the adopted budget, that ending fund balance is $17,986,682, and the amended budget is $18,008,312. So the ending fund balance is a little bit higher than what was adopted, and that difference is in the change column of $21,630. So that was that project where we had to increase revenue more than expense, and so there was a little bit of a discrepancy that doesn't typically happen.
I think you said before that we're supposed to be about 20% our fund balance. Am I right in saying that fund balance of 18 million, we want to keep that about 20% of our overall budget?
We do, but we know that this year
Yeah.
we were going to have a deficit, and that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. What percentage is that? I'm just guessing.
Ooh,
About 18%.
Yeah, because we're about 100 million. Okay.
yeah.
It's
And again,
improving, right?
that's the budget. So we'll be talking about actuals and how the budget actually performed at the next board meeting.
Thank you.
And our deficit was pretty much right on, spot on, what we thought it would be. I think it was 5.1 million.
Yeah, it was a little bit higher than that, but it was, again, not everything's done. There's still some adjustments that are going to happen. But right now that 5.13, 5.2, we're coming in around there. That's what it's looking like. But we'll know more and we'll analyze it and we'll come back and talk about that in August. In September. It's already August.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, it's already here.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, if no other questions, we're looking,
I had a comment.
Sure.
Oh, you're doing that. I'm sorry, go ahead with the motion, Claire, please.
okay, we are looking for a motion to approve the revised 2023-2024 budget.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, comments? No? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Mike.
One more point before I turn it back to you.
Sure.
And I had a comment, just a general comment.
Will you want to do the general? Sure, go for it.
Want to put the point?
That's fine. Go for it.
I just want to say that I've had the not necessary pleasure, but opportunity to listen to a lot of presentations on revenue limit and funding sources. And I just want to say that Dr. Owen's presentation the other night was probably as clear as I've ever seen. So really good job there, Dr. Owens, and thank you.
Really was. One of the point I wanted to finish up with is he also did a report on the Gorky Park agreement on the improvements, and I skipped over that. And so our commitment to helping the improvements and the shared value of that, and it's pretty much completed with this year. And there's an opportunity to do a tour of all the improvements there, and it would be this Friday at 10 o'clock. And if you would like to do it, Corey has extended the invitation, I think, contact Annette, and I know there's a couple of us, 3 or 4 of us at least, that are gonna go to it now.
Yep.
We'll probably have to post it.
Yeah.
We get too many.
Yep, we will.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nice job.
All right, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 9, educational services. 9A, we have educational services committee report with our chair, G. Pope.
First, I'm gonna talk about the information only thing. We did 3 things. The curriculum adoption cycle we went over, and it's nice that we are now back on schedule. We were off schedule with COVID and a few other things, but we are now back on schedule with our curriculum adoption cycle, and that can only mean good things for our scores. The other 2 things, Chris is gonna take on the student academic standards and the secondary safety memo.
Great.
Cell phone thing.
Thank you, G. And I'm going to go in the opposite order of how G shared those. I'm going to begin with the secondary cell phone expectations, and this is a revised presentation based on some valued feedback that were received from the Educational Services Committee last Monday. We had some lengthy discussion, particularly around the cell phone component of the secondary safety procedures and protocols that we plan to implement for the upcoming year. So if I could ask the board to just hold questions until we complete the presentation, I think we'll have the ability to answer a number of them as we progress through what is a very brief presentation, but you will see some specific and intentional revisions that we've included. I want to just begin by kind of grounding us in our why. Certainly it is no secret that the board, the community, and our full administrative team have been very focused on changing our academic trajectory for students and interrupting the pattern that we've been seeing over the last several years, which is a gradual or slight decline in academic performance, particularly in the areas of ELA and math on our school accountability report cards. Recognizing that and knowing that some of what we're going to talk through tonight will certainly have a positive impact on advancing student achievement. By restricting some of the cell phone use in classrooms, we certainly acknowledge and recognize that we will decrease distractions both for students and for staff, and we certainly believe that long-term that will have a positive impact on academic achievement overall. Sort of sitting alongside of that, as part of this discussion, we also recognize that we started talking about this because we did see a significant uptick in the number of students who were misusing cell phones in the classroom and in the school environment, related to social media or just inappropriate cell phone use. So with that, I will pass it to Jeff here to walk us through the revisions that we made and the follow-through that we plan to provide for the board.
So those of you on Ed Services are going to see a lot of similarities in the layout to this. One of the things I want to thank everybody for the Ed Services group on was the feedback. I've had an opportunity to meet with all of the secondary principals, And they appreciate the fact that this is a topic of discussion within the board because it's one that's going on in their buildings as well. So, and Chris already alluded to this, left side is kind of that review. We did that comprehensive analysis looking at our student data and identifying that we were seeing a pattern between an uptick in especially our really intense bullying incidents and our examples of fighting and the role cell phone and social media was playing in that. So we really wanted to look at a response. And this was something that I worked closely on with the secondary administration, especially the last half and then through the summer, in talking about how are we going to move forward. And one of the things we all agreed to was we need clear expectations for our students and our families. They need to walk into schools knowing what's expected of them. The other part that's not up here that I do think is important for this group is we also talked about what can we reasonably manage. If we're going to put a full implementation in, we're not going to add staff for this. So we need to be able to manage what we're putting in place, and that was a topic of conversation at all of the sites, that this needed to be something that we could manage as well. Next part was clarity and cell phone expectations. So you'll see we divided this into two parts, and we added some clarifying language. Left side is our junior highs, so Ben Franklin and PJ Jacobs, and then pods, grades 7 and 8. No cell phones are to be used from the beginning of the day bell to the end of the day bell. So during that period of time, students should have their phones put away. All the students have a carrying case, I know because I have 2 of them, where they can put their cell phones right in their carrying case. They can still have it with them for their Chromebook. But if they need to call home, right, we have these wonderful things, they're called telephones. They're actually plugged into walls. We have lots of them in our schools, so they can go to the main office. They can go to the guidance office, and they are welcome to call and get the ability to get support there. Now, this identifies a minimum expectation. So in conversations with all the building principals, they know that if we identify in this review as we go through it, that they do have the ability to increase those expectations. High school is going to look a little different. So that's SPASH, CFC, and then PODS, grades 9 through 12. So cell phones are not to be used at any time in any learning area during the class period. So that bell rings, the class starts, they're out, they're gone. And it can't be brought back out until the end of the class bell. Again, that's that minimum expectation. Part of what we wanted to stress here, and I talked to Mr. Vollendorf quite a bit about this, is while we want to not have cell phones interrupting our classroom environments, we're also training our future workers. And at some point in time, we own some responsibility to help them understand how to use the tool. I remember when I went through school, we didn't have cell phones when I started, but we had pen and paper, and a lot of kids got in trouble for passing notes and writing mean things on them. Never did I hear one of my friends go to a principal's office and have the principal take and say, "You don't have pen or paper." Like, we didn't do that. We taught the students how to use things effectively. So at that high school level, we want to keep that in. And then this is a brand new slide, and this came from a lot of feedback and discussion. Chris, Corey, and I had several conversations around this, and I also talked to the secondary principals. We want to monitor and evaluate this. So how are we going to know if this change is actually helping? So there's 2 pieces we're going to look at. Left side, you're going to see student data. We want that quantitative data so we can look at our student information system and we can identify, are we seeing a reduction in the number of bullying and harassment incidents involving cell phones or social media? We track those and we can look at that, right? Are we seeing improved progress towards our academic goals? And are we seeing a reduction in off-task behavior related to cell phones and social media? These are all things we can collect data on. The right side, which I think is equally, if not more so important, we need to collect some qualitative data. We need to do some surveys of our students, of our staff, and of our parents. How has this change hopefully improving their educational experience? We want to collect some data because one of the things the principals across the board talked about is if we're going to make any other changes, this group, all of these people have to be on board with it. They have to be stakeholders in the discussion. So we need to collect their feedback so we can start from that point. And then this was the last one. I am particularly excited about this. Again, this is a little bit in that broader context of what we're doing for secondary security and safety. But during the 24-25 school year, we'll be including resources on bullying and safe social media use for every one of our sites to be able to include in their monthly newsletters. So I'm working with Sarah O'Donnell on this. I'm working with some contacts that we have with the police department and pulling some of those resources to inform our parents. And then the other thing is we're going to have 4 parent engagement forums throughout the course of the school year. These will be open to parents that have students in grades 5 through 12. Initially, we were going to do high school only or secondary only, but we decided to extend that down to 5th grade. And the focus of these is really going to be on reducing cyberbullying and safe use of social media. The first one of these is going to be on September 18th at SPASH in the library from 6 till 7. That first one, we know the topic on. What we're really going to be talking there is getting parents resources. So if I'm going to talk to you about effective use of social media, let's make sure our parents are informed on what resources are available for them. We're also going to be providing them with some background. Brian Casey will be there with me. We've got some great resources within Securely that parents can leverage. So we want to make sure we inform them on how to leverage those tools as well.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. I think before we entertain questions, I would just like to make one small clarification. When we map out those expectations for junior high, for PODS, and then for CFC and for SPASH, I do think it's important to acknowledge when we say these are minimum requirements, we recognize that there will be students throughout the course of the year who have a series of violations related to cell phone use or inappropriate use that will have more restrictions placed on them. So we're not anticipating that there would be a global or holistic increase in restrictions at any one of those sites, but we recognize that there will be individual students and groups of students who will have far more restrictions than what we're sharing with you tonight, which is basically our overarching guidance.
Thank you, Chris.
Yep.
I just had a quick question regarding what kind of consequences would a scholar expect if he or she did violate the policy, and what kind of support will classroom teachers have in terms of enforcement of this policy?
So that's a great question, Dennis. What we did is at each one of the buildings levels, it's slightly different. So Ben Franklin and PJ Jakes are the exact same. At SPASH, typically what they have it set up as the teachers would give the students a warning, right? We're not gonna take it away immediately, right? We would give a student a warning. On the second warning, the teacher would have the student put the device in a box of some kind. Our teachers, we instruct them, don't touch it. Like you don't want to drop it on accident. And then during their period when they have the time, they'll get that down to the main office, so SPASH North office. They would bring it down there and SPASH North office would communicate to that student and let them know they can pick it up there at the end of the day. Because we really do want to try to limit, and I'm sure Alex would appreciate this, right? We don't want to put too much emphasis on taking away classroom teachers' time. We want them to be able to instruct, and that was part of why we started with this policy, is we wanted something that we felt we could enforce, and we would be able to have the staff to be able to handle consequences fairly for all students.
And Jeff, at what point would a parent be notified that, the cell phone is being brought to the office? I only ask because parents can redirect if they know that this is an issue. So at what point do we communicate with the parents?
I would have to look at the principals, how that's set up. I know at the junior high level, what I've been told is when those are confiscated, parents are informed right away.
Okay.
But I would have to check with Mr. Vollendorf to ensure that it is the exact same at SPASH.
Okay. I think that would be helpful just for
Okay.
parents to help redirect and reinforce at home. Other questions or comments? Barb?
How often are you going to evaluate your data?
Our goal was to bring back to this group in the spring because we needed time for parents and for students to be able to see and access it. So we would be pulling that data within our system continually, but to get us all of those pieces, it's probably going to be spring when we can bring that holistic view back.
And Barb, I think it's important to share here, if there was an interest from the board to take a look sooner, certainly the quantitative data is readily accessible. The qualitative data would be a little more difficult for us to be able to collect prior to spring. We certainly would want staff, students, and families to live this for a few months before we ask them to provide us with feedback. But the quantitative data we would have access to, on a daily basis. So if there's an interest from the board to take a look at that sooner, say in January or February, we certainly can add that to an upcoming agenda.
I'd love to have it back in January. I mean, I'd like to have just a report back as to how's it going. I mean, you know, what's happening with kids, what's happening, you know, with the communication with parents, you know, how's our staff
How's it
doing?
being
How are we
received?
doing with the screeners? Like we take those tests spring or fall, winter,
Any
spring.
correlation,
If there's any-
potential, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
potential correlation
Yeah.
with outcomes, because that was one of the things that you had mentioned.
Yeah, and if we did February, we would have our January data wouldn't be in, our winter data wouldn't be in by the January board meeting, but we would be able to do that for February. Yeah.
Dennis?
Yeah, I listened to the comments at the committee meeting, and I thought there was good discussion, and I certainly respect the administration's. The idea is that you don't want to go all the way there, and it would create quite a shock. I believe that the results are going to be pretty evident in the first couple months. I mean, we'll see what kind of, if they're able to refocus their behaviors, et cetera. But I think, given the conversation I heard, I think it's very important that we do get together January or February, either one, and have that data presented to the board. And if the board feels at that time, we'll put it on as agenda item. If the board feels at that time that the data suggests that we're not making the kind of headway we all hope it does,
Right.
then we could choose to have, to impose a more stricter policy. I think
greater
it'll be interesting. I mean, I have to believe that our teachers are having a real difficult time instructing scholars when we all know it's I'm fair game. I'm on addiction too. I'm on it all the time, and you know, a lot of you are, and we know that the scholars are as well, which is okay in some ways, but when you're trying to instruct them on new learning, it must be impossible in some situations. So I'm hoping that this works out, but it's a big enough priority, I believe, for many members of the board that we want to bring it back, and if we're not showing that data, I think the board wants to say, okay, we're going to tighten up this policy if that's fair.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely fair, and I think it affords us the opportunity, I think, to also bring our staff and our families along. If indeed we do make a decision to become more restrictive, that we can begin that communication rollout so that we can be prepared for the 25-26 implementation. And that timeline feels very comfortable to me.
Related to communication rollout, how will this be communicated to students? So is it who's communicating, when?
Each one of the building principals had a rollout plan, Jen, when we talked about this in June. And they built that out. So as school year starts
Sure.
getting, you get your initial communications. Each one of the principals have been identified that this is something you got to make sure that you're putting back out to parents, to your students, so everybody is aware of this as we go through that. Because that was one of the things we built in right away. Is it really at the junior high level, having children there, right? It's not a big shift. This is what the expectation was
Right.
before, but it is very much going to shift at SPASH, and Mr. Vollendorf is aware of that.
We will communicate with families too prior to students entering the building so
Okay.
that they're aware what the new expectations are.
Wonderful.
And that we're gonna monitor, and if we're not all working together to follow these, then this could be more restrictive.
Okay, perfect, thank you. DeBarb. Like,
I would still like to see us implemented in the elementary schools as well. Because if you give those kids the ability to use their phones in elementary and then they jump to Ben or PJ's,
Makes
Yeah,
sense.
that-
you know,
yeah.
it seems, that's just my opinion.
Just to begin the conditioning of expectations, so I think that is something, if we could look at that.
Absolutely.
We do know that at the primary buildings that there are students, mine included, with cell phones, so, yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
without question.
Yeah, it's hard to go from a sixth grade to the
Yes, that's a
junior
good
high
point.
and
Right.
back off.
Very, very good point, Barb. Will?
Thank you. So just to go off that, I know that we already have policies on paper, like you said, so how are we going to make sure that this is consistently, strictly enforced from September to June, right? Because it's easy to say that we should do these things, but we already have these policies on paper and they are not followed.
You
So,
almost act like you were a sub in our buildings.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I observed a few
Imagine
rule
that.
violations.
It's gonna start
can
tomorrow,
I-
first of all, before Jeff chimes in. We have our full leadership team tomorrow with principals, and part of our discussion tomorrow is, it is absolutely important that our principals are holding staff accountable to this. Because if we've got expectations, we can't complain about students bringing cell phones if we're not following our own expectations.
I trust the staff, but
Yeah.
it's hard when
It is.
it's easy to let things slip over time and give exceptions to
Yep.
students, and it's really easy to fall off. So
And I think what we'll be looking at in addition to that, Will, is that was the piece of making sure that when we roll this out to staff, we're also able to say, and here's how administration is going to help with
Right.
enforcement.
Okay.
And I think that's been our missing link a little bit in some of our discussions, and that's what we've been talking a lot at our secondary principal meetings.
Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
And
Steve?
staff is going to follow the same
Yes.
Yes.
guidelines.
What was that, Barb?
Staff follows the same guidelines.
Well, we
Oh.
need to be role models, so we need
Absolutely.
that's what
Yeah,
I
that's a, yes. Is that part of the
It's-
expectation?
To
It's
Corey's
actually
point, it's-
on our
I'm-
leadership agenda for
I'm the
tomorrow.
one talking about it at leadership, so you bet.
Okay.
And subs will be informed as well.
You know, that's a really good point.
Yeah, consistency and the experience is going to be
Just
critical.
because I know that, you know, you can have A sub who is on the ball and B sub is
That's what-
Our teachers
not
don't
not
have access
as
to their
attentive,
Right.
we'll say,
Right.
access
to that particular
their
thing.
cell phones.
Our subs are hired
Not
through a
during class.
company,
Yeah, that makes sense.
and that should be communicated to the person who runs that company.
And they can probably communicate with all of the subs, yes.
Can I say something? First of all, we've had phone policy, and to Will's point is, you know, it hasn't been enforced, you know, it's been hit or miss, things like that. My opinion is, well, in 4 years, I've never talked about this at a board meeting that I can remember. So now we have. Now it's, if we vote this in, it's board policy. Doesn't matter what.
This is not an action
not
item for a vote.
Information.
This
We're
is
not
a,
gonna vote on
information.
this?
no, it's a day-to-day operation of
Well,
the,
see, I'm sorry, but I disagree with that we should vote on this, because if we're gonna hold people to this, our adults in the, this is policy. If you're not following this, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're not performing your job. It hasn't reached that level because we've never talked about it. So we've had, I think, hit or miss. Somebody has an opinion and then they want to run their opinion, and now somebody else has another opinion. Because we had very different enforcement at our junior highs in the last meeting. I think it should be emphasized that this is what we do. Whether you think it's right or not, if you want to work here, this is what you're going to do.
It sounds like it's going to be that way, though. It
Yep.
sounds like this
I hope
is
so.
a,
That's the approach.
We've had policy before. We never followed it.
what I
In-
hear.
have a policy, we had an expectation. that
Handbook
was-
language.
Handbook, right.
And so now it's
But
the
isn't
enforcement
handbook policy?
component.
Pardon me?
Isn't handbook policy?
No,
It's not voted up by the board.
no.
Was this going to be in the handbook?
Practice.
Yes.
Okay.
The
And
new
is-
language.
The rollout is this year.
Yep.
So
yes.
when they come first day, and it's gonna be hard. Change is always hard, especially for kids. It's gonna be the first half year, I bet there's gonna be a lot of fighting about it and a lot of complaining and people standing up to it and things like that. It's gonna take a while. It's gonna take, our, teachers and administrators to realize this is our policy.
And parents at home to help enforce, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, when I was at that meeting, that conference that Ted and I were at, we talked to other school board, that's one of the best things about going to these, talk to other school board members. Number one on people's minds are cell phone use. It's the single thing that they feel hurts academic achievement.
Meg or?
I want to note also that there is the ability for the board president, vice president, and superintendent, when bringing this back to us, to make a decision that we want to strengthen the existing policy. So that may be something that we see in a future agenda, depending on what the experience is. I guess I always also want to note, to me, we provide every child with a computer, all of our scholars, all of our students. And we place significant restrictions on those computers. What students are able to access, how those devices are used, and it just struck me as the reality that so we're giving them this computer, which has the learning tools that they need within the classroom, and then we're letting them have a cell phone that doesn't have any of those restrictions, that allows constant communication happening. I have three of my 4 children are adult children now, are teachers, and they all struggle with distractions within their classrooms. And it's not only the individual student receiving the ping or receiving the message or looking at the phone, it's the students around them. So for me, I'm really grateful that what we led with here is what our district, our board main goal this year, as well as the superintendent's main goal this year, is that enhancement of academic performance by our students, and also that decreasing those learning gaps with some of our student population. And I think if enforced, that this will go a long way to limiting some of the distraction in our school communities. There's people can, you know, and I'm not going to say I'm an expert, but you can go out and take a look. There are districts that have had a year of experience with no use of cell phones in their schools, and what they're finding is higher academic performance. They're finding higher interaction among students in the lunchrooms, in the classrooms, in conversation. They're finding less bullying. They're finding less communication inappropriate, at least during the school day when we have the ability to support that type of environment. And so I'm hopeful that that's the direction we're moving in. I think it's the way to go.
Just to respond to Julie, I think right now, this is coming from our administrative team. It's an expectation they're establishing for the district as a whole, and they are talking about how it is going to be different than the past, because they're talking about how they're going to roll it out and how they're going to keep buildings accountable, and how they're going to assist our teachers. On the other hand, as I said in committee, we had a lot of discussion, at least I heard a lot of discussion, regarding we think it should be more stringent. And that's why I asked that we bring it back in January, February, and then have it brought back as a vote of the board in terms of a presentation to them of either keeping the same because it's working well, or if it's not, what the modifications are that we're going to have to tamp it down more. And I think that's a reasonable way of going. We're giving the administration and the district an opportunity to implement something that they feel strongly about and we support. But if it's not effective, then we're coming back and saying, now we're going to have policy, and now it's in our hands in terms of what that looks like, and the administration implements it. So I hope it works.
And I am appreciative of the, I think, kind of meet in the middle right now to just kind of see we're working on enforcement. I agree with you. At the high school levels, it's important to teach those soft skills like accountability and self-control and all of that, because these are, they're going to be adults that enter the workforce in the real world. So I appreciate that approach. And I also recognize, Barb, that if this is not stringent enough, yes, then to your point, we've got to support our teachers in the classroom. I also want to say thank you, because I know Barb and we've had many conversations regarding bullying as it relates to social media and cell phone usage. We know that we want to double click and really focus and be hyper-focused on academic achievement. And I feel like this policy is being really responsive to all of the feedback that we've received from parents and teachers. So thank you.
Welcome.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Nice job, Jeff.
And the next item is an action item, so I will be looking for a motion. This is standard operating procedure annually. The board is asked by statute to approve the academic standards for the academic year that we are entering, so for 24-25. I do want to point out here that we did make a couple of revisions to dates where we had updates that were provided, and that was in the area of agriculture, foods, and natural resources, and business and information tech. And both of those sets of standards were revised in 2024. The previous iteration was in existence since 2013. So we were able to make those changes here, and this document will be linked on our school website under Ed Services for anyone who has an interest in looking more closely at any of the academic standards for any of those content areas. So at this point, I'd be looking for a motion unless there are questions.
I will make a motion to approve the student academic standards as presented.
A motion made by Meg,
Second.
second by Will. Questions, comments?
Could I just make?
Sure.
Because we have lots of time. If we run out of time, I'd say no, let's get out. But I'm sorry, Jim. Just had to. I came in, I talked to Chris, I was looking at the standards, you
Yes.
know, as the standards, you know, and some of them go back to 2011. Now, we're asked to review and realign every 6 years. Some of them haven't been changed in 13 years. And it's like one of those things that's like, what? If you ever get a chance, you know, you got if you got a couple extra hours, Jim, you know, and you want to sit down and look at those standards.
Riveting, Jim, riveting.
I have no life because that's what I do. No, but it's not the standards themselves, but the fact that they haven't been reviewed in so long. It's just amazing that we don't, you know, why aren't we, I don't know. It's just a comment that I had when I saw it that amazed me. I'm sorry, I'm done.
No, that's okay. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Chief.
So we have a motion on the table and a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, moving on to agenda item 10, student services. We have our annual resolution regarding expulsions and independent hearing officers with Jenny McMahon.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's been enjoying their summer. It's really good to see you all again. It's been a whole year since we had this discussion topic. It comes up once each year where we get to talk about what would we do in the very rare event that we had a student who committed an expellable offense. Expulsion is different than things like a detention, an in-school suspension, even an out-of-school suspension. It is a situation where a behavior that was demonstrated is really out of the norms, something quite dangerous, extremely disruptive, and happens very rarely, which I'm really glad to report as a bottom line. For today, though, this recommendation for a motion would be, what would we do in that situation? Each year we have approved that in the situation where a student has committed an expellable offense, that we would bring in an independent hearing officer. In our situation, someone who's trained in the legal profession to help us work through that situation and make a recommendation. So our annual motion or information that I presented to you would be to keep that as the same as we have for a very long time in our district, that we would use that high level of guidance and support for our district in making a very high stakes decision for a student and their family. Questions on that?
And Jenny, maybe just for the public, what is the average? I mean, I know this is very rare, but how often, maybe in the last 5 years, have we used an expulsion officer?
Sure. In the last 2 years, we have had 0 students moved forward for an expulsion. In the years previous, it was 1. So very, very rare. Thank you for that question.
Good.
Okay, any other questions for Jenny? Okay, if not, we're looking for a motion to approve the use of an independent hearing officer to determine student expulsion cases as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Motion made by Alex, second by Barb. Questions, comments? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny.
And moving on to agenda item 11, technology services. We have a cybersecurity briefing with Ryan Casey.
I'm getting the clicker here. I just have to, I do need to click, but you notice it does say briefing, which means it will be brief. So even though there's many slides, I do not intend to keep you here all night. And although I would love to, I could go on and on.
Well, according
I
to G,
will
we have
not.
all kinds of time.
That's right.
And it's still
Is
early.
this going to be riveting too?
Equally riveting.
Yes, well, I guess compared to academic standards, you may find it more riveting.
Careful, Brian.
My opinion. Why are we here? How did this come about? It's been an awful year for K-12s and also post-secondary in terms of cyber crime. incidents very bad. There doesn't appear to be any end in sight. Also, a number of businesses. It is in the headlines when you go to WSAB meetings. They're talking about it. So we were having these conversations. I thought it was appropriate at this time that we provide some information to the board. I met with Corey, and she thought that this would be a good way to start to give you an overview of what is it that we do here. When we talk about cybersecurity, what do we actually do in the district and where are we at? How do we measure that? All cybersecurity revolves around these three principles. It's called a triad: integrity, availability, and confidentiality. We have a number of confidential records, student records, health records, disciplinary records, behavior records, employee records. All of that information is very confidential, and the public trusts us to keep that safe. We don't want that out there. That is hugely important. Integrity is the quality of our data and our systems. That works in hand with confidentiality in terms of we want to be able to say no one has touched our data. No one's altered it. No one's changed it. We can say for sure that this data is valid. Likewise, our hardware, our systems, they behave as they are intended to. And also for us, availability. Do we have the resources we need? Do students have those Chromebooks to use? Do we have Wi-Fi? Do we have printing? Do we have phones? Do we have door access? Do we have food service, point of sale? All of those things that we need to run a school system are largely dependent on technology. It would be very difficult to run a school for more than a day without computers or a network. We would struggle mightily. So those are the goals. And luckily for us, we don't have to kind of come up with our own agenda, our own plan on how to do cybersecurity well. We use the NIST cybersecurity framework, the CSF 2.0. NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They're kind of like the experts when it comes to cybersecurity, and they have these publications that come out. A large number of businesses, government entities, nonprofits, schools use NIST. That's what we use for our entire framework. That's where we get our emergency planning from. It kind of tells us what is it that is important, what do you need to have in place, and how to do it. Out of that has come the CIS controls. That is just a more detailed way of how you do all this work. So if you look at NIST, it says recover, identify, protect. How do you actually do that? That comes from the CIS controls. And when this came out, I think about 3 or 4 years ago, it was perfect for us because it was literally a blueprint. How do you do this? How do you know you're doing well? So we started work on the CIS controls. And if you complete these controls, at least implementation group 1, you're going to be protected against 80 to 90% of the threats that are out there. And we've done that. I'm going to walk you through that. As we walk through the controls, I will tell you there's implementation group 1, which are the basics. Then there's 2, which is more advanced. And then there's 3, which is very advanced. So when I go through these and you see deficiencies there, it doesn't necessarily mean that we aren't doing a good job. It just means there isn't something we haven't achieved yet. It's maybe obtainable, maybe it's not, given our current resources, but we're pretty good. So that being said, I'm going to walk through each control briefly, and that will give you a good overview. It's like when we say cybersecurity, what does that mean? Our assessment of the controls 1 through 18 was measured. It's been measured several times. Most recently, we're doing very well. You can see that the yellow is good, or the orange part of that. That means we've completed those controls. We've assessed them. They're in place. We have documentation, and we know that they're working. So the blue is yet to be done or unachieved. So out of our overall ranking, we would rank at the green at 774, which is very good. Obviously, to get to the perfect range, you're looking at 800 plus, which maybe we'll achieve someday, but we're doing pretty good for right now. The first control is inventory and control of enterprise assets. So how do we know what devices are on the network? How do we know what devices are ours, what their characteristics are, how they behave? We do really well at that. We have a number of systems in place to be able to say, yep, that's our device. Here's everything that's on it. So in that control, we're doing excellent. Likewise with software, how do we know what software is being used? Can we monitor that? Do we have it approved? We have a number of controls in place that allow us to say this software is approved, it can be used. This software is not approved, it can't be used. So we have controls that allow us to restrict that. Okay. Control number 3, data protection. What are we doing to protect that data that I mentioned before, the integrity, the confidentiality of those data? We have really good data privacy. We've worked on that for a number of years in terms of approving other vendors that we work with that we give data to make sure that they're taking care of it. Also, our own controls. We do what's called data loss prevention, and in essence, trying to prevent data from leaking outside the organization. Not always perfect, but we do have that control in place. Secure configuration of enterprise assets and software. A lot of these attacks that you see are due to the fact that someone didn't set up something properly, whether that was a firewall, a wireless network, a network switch, computers, you name it. We've done pretty good. We've made a lot of advanced strides in that area in terms of making sure that our configurations are always up to date and we've done it properly. And we don't have to do it alone. We've hired a number of experts to come in that are actually much better at it than we are, to come in and say, yep, you got it. Account management is something we've made a lot of progress in. We do very well in that terms of like when a new employee or student comes on, the automated provisioning of accounts, the controls and protections that go along with that in terms of identity management. We know where people log in. We know what kind of devices they use. We have things like multi-factor authentication to protect accounts. So we've done great work in that area. Okay. Access control management. Those are controls, just like I mentioned before, multi-factor control. We have policies that would restrict access depending on your geographic location, depending on what you're doing. There's sort of heuristic controls that would say, like, what is that behavior that you're doing? It doesn't look normal. Block the access. One of the prime things that in getting cybersecurity right and doing it well is to make sure everything's up to date. If your software is not up to date, the bad actors will find a way to exploit it. It's out on the internet. I mean, if you're running something that's very, very old, there's probably 100 ways to exploit that particular software system. It takes a lot of work. That is probably one of our biggest challenges, is to make sure that we are constantly updating software and patching it. A lot of it's automated now on all of our PCs. When there's an update to a software application that comes along, some things you can't, and you just have to work at it and make sure that you do things. And going back to that triad, again, we could make it really great in terms of integrity and confidentiality. We're protecting that, but if we rush changes through, bad things can happen too. So that sometimes, depending on the criticality of the system, the change might have to come slower. Audit logs, we collect a lot more data about everything the computers are saying and doing, which is of prime importance. If something goes wrong, you want to know how. We do that on the cloud. We do a lot of that locally. Most of it's on the cloud. Email and web browser, the two probably the most critical things for our users. Email is the biggest vulnerability that our users are exposed to bad actors through phishing or being sent malicious attachments. We've made a number of improvements to make that better. Likewise, your browser is probably the most important thing you use when you interact with the internet. People take that for granted. All of our browsers on our equipment here are automatically updated. You never have to worry. We also configure those browsers. You don't have the ability to go in and change things to lessen the security. So if you're using one of our computers or a Chromebook, those browsers have been dialed in very, very well. Malware, how do we detect malicious software? We have a number of systems in place that allow us to detect that and remove it before it happens, whether that's being sent in transit, whether it's downloaded or actually on a machine. Data recovery, and that refers to what if the worst happens. We have backups. That's always very, very important. And I think one of the things appreciate that we've done is we've have redundant backups. We don't just have one backups. We have many backups in different methods. And we also test those backups to make sure that they work, because a lot of other organizations that have gotten themselves into hot water try and do a restore from backup, and they find out that those are no longer viable, and that's a really bad day. So we work really hard on that. Network infrastructure, as I referred to before, that's the Wi-Fi, that's the computers talking to each other on the network, all of those things that you never usually see, switches, wireless, access controllers, all of those kinds of things. We manage those, and we're doing a pretty good job on that. We got 4 out of 8. When you see that it says like 21 out of 6, if you were going to try and give that a percentage, you think, well, that's not so good. Again, you got to keep in mind, I'm not getting into the weeds about the control groups, but that pretty much assumes we got implementation group 1 done and probably a lot of 2. Network monitoring, we've added that on over the last couple of years, that we're actively watching what kind of traffic comes into our network, detecting bad traffic, stopping it, and also intervening when we have to. Security awareness, those are the wonderful trainings that we send out to staff. You may have seen some of those. Last year we tried something new, short commercial-like little videos. The reaction was, fairly good, I would say, compared to what we used to do. People responded well to that. But it's absolutely important and crucial that we have a way to train people, because if we can't educate them about the most basic threats, then they're a threat to everyone. We want to have a baseline understanding of what is safe and what's not safe to do. So we do security awareness training. Service provider management. As an educational institution, we are required to work with numerous vendors. We're not like a business where we can say, well, we want to find someone else to do this for us. Sometimes the DPI or the federal government or someone tells us you have to use this particular software. We have over 800 different vendors that we work with at various levels, whether that's a free ancillary product to something that's absolutely crucial. And each one of those has to be vetted to see what kind of data they're collecting and how. It's a Herculean task that we just do the best we can at. And so our strategy is to try and at least understand where our data is going and what the risks are involved with that. Application software security, we don't do that because we do not develop our own software. Some districts that are mega huge, Los Angeles, New York, other places like that, they actually write their own software. This doesn't apply, therefore there's very few controls that we have. Incident response, we do very well at this. We've had numerous chances to test it out. Most recently we had a data breach tabletop exercise where we walk through our plan and test it and see where the gaps are in that plan. It went very well. We learned a lot of things. So we're pretty confident in the plans that we have in place. Penetration testing, that's when you hire somebody to come in and test all of this. And we've done that twice. The first time was a freebie from our auditors that did, I would call a mini pen test, they call it. It wasn't that great. We learned a lot, but I mean, they just, they came in and they were able to do what they wanted. The good news is we saw everything they did, so if it was real, we probably would have had a real quick heads up. The second one we did was a paid engagement, and we fared very well. We learned a lot, but they didn't come up with anything that was so, I guess, vulnerable that would be something that we'd have to react to immediately. So I felt pretty good about that test. And that's it for the controls. I walked through them fairly quickly. We also had the opportunity to measure our progress towards these controls nationally. It's called the National Cybersecurity Review. That's put on by the U.S. government. Any institution that uses the controls could do this, and then you're compared to a peer group. Obviously, for us, our peer group are other K-12 schools. So that red line there is what they would say that is the average score. We're way above average. And if you look over on the right, that's what the maturity score is for most of the other K-12. So if you want to compare us nationally, we're ahead of the curve. That's just a breakdown on some of the scores. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, but it's just portrayed there numerically. I think when I put this together at the time, it looked like it was very interesting, so I put it in. This is a more detailed by category, but it's very similar. So we could go, like if I was giving a very detailed description, we could go in each one of these and explain the how of it. But the gist of it is, when we measure these controls, we are doing much better than most of our peers. And it's not a thing where it's like, yay for us and boo for them, but really it's important to understand, I think for you guys as a board, where we're at. Are we safe? No one's 100% safe. Have we reduced our risk to an acceptable level? Yes. We've done everything to reduce the risk. The risk is never going to be zero. And as you can see on those controls, there's always little areas that need tweaking, that need support, and it's evolving. What you see here now will be different in a year. And a lot of these controls may change because the bad guys keep coming up with new ways to try and take you down. So it's ongoing work. It's important. We've reduced our risk, and I feel like we're as these data show, doing really well compared to most schools. Okay, there's the numeric breakdown again. The other thing that Corey and I talked about, when you talk about these things, like this is the best way I had to explain from a very high level, pretty much like the basics of what we do. However, for cybersecurity, it's mainly weeks and months are almost way too long. So we're going to try maybe doing once a month at a board meeting, a quick 4 or 5 minute overview of what happened that month. What were some of the types of things that we dealt with? It would be very brief, but then also you might get to see some things like how many emails did we have come in that were malicious? How many attempts were there from outside to penetrate our network that we blocked? Things like that. And if there are threats that are evolving that are relevant to us, briefly mention those. Because that is an evolving landscape that you may be interested in. Again, there may be headlines. What occurred to a particular school system. So that would be an experiment. We've never done this before, but I think it'd be beneficial to try that. So that is all for the briefing. I hope that was brief enough. I think it was.
It's great, Brian.
Okay.
That was great.
Good job.
Question, Dennis.
Just a comment. First of all, I want to thank you, just because the insight into the complexity of what you do and the importance of what you do. But I do want to say that I think you oversold it a little bit when you said it would be more riveting than academic standards. I'm not sure you hit that mark.
I think I'm going to pay for that later somehow. I don't know.
Yes, Ted.
Brian, you talked about how we get the security awareness and skills training.
Yes.
And I really like that because it's really taught me to look at websites and the addresses and everything else. And I, of course, use that in my daily life because I see, can't believe how I'm being phished all the time. But do we do any of that for the students? I know you said staff and administration.
We have what's called digital citizenship training that comes in various forms. There's an actual curriculum library media specialist delivered in the elementary school. And as they progress up into the secondary schools, they get it in various classes. And also during their advisory periods, we've added lessons. And it's absolutely crucial for them. I think you were just talking about them growing up being digital citizens, learning how to navigate that world with a computer in your hand, in your pocket, and a camera and a recording studio and social media. It's absolutely important.
Sweet. We talked, you talked about how the low-hanging fruit are the ones that get picked.
Yeah.
And we're above that because you have the security in place, so, but no one's 100%. It's just the fact of the matter. Do we have a board response plan? And if we do, who on the board would be working with you on the response?
We have an incident response plan.
Okay.
Currently, there is no role for the board except for governance. If there was an incident that we responded to, you would be briefed on that incident. If there were decisions to be made regarding that response, that's when you would be briefed. But as far as like responding to the incident, that would not be a board function.
Well, and I know when we talked about the one school board that was hacked here locally, they had the superintendent and the board president, and then they were the only ones that were involved in dealing with it for a large part of it. And I didn't know if that.
I think I know the district you're talking about, and I mean, it's obviously in a smaller district, they have less personnel to deal with that. So, in essence, the school board president and superintendent, it was all hands on deck that they had to deal with negotiating a ransom payment and learning how to buy Bitcoin.
I prefer
and
not
things
to
like
be
that.
involved in that, just for future reference.
That sounds like the head of the business committee.
That does sound riveting, but yes.
There is a plan in place though, too.
With any kind of luck, it'll never be a problem.
Right.
But
Yeah.
thank you for all you do. We do
Yes.
appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
G.
Is there any estimate you can make as a school district like ours, what it costs to stay safe? Like,
You mean what we spend on
yeah,
cybersecurity?
just some estimate for an entity our size.
For what we get, it's a great value, and most people don't say that about security because it usually there's no perceived value. It just costs money, you know. And until something happens and you don't have it, and they say, "Why don't we pay for that?" For us, we're probably spending 0.2 to 0.3% of our budget. It's very out of the technology budget. It's a significant amount. But over the overall budget, out of a $100 million budget, I'd say under 200,000.
Doesn't seem like much.
Good value.
But I'll bet there's a lot of hidden costs in.
Well, there's the personnel. Obviously, you have to invest in your personnel and the time and the resources and other things, and some things overlap. It's not just there's one magic product or thing that you buy. You can embed security in everything you do. When you buy new software or you configure new systems, if you have security in mind, that starts there.
Egg?
So, you know, oftentimes like training occurs and it occurs at a point in time. And then if new staff would come on, they potentially, that time would have passed. So the training that the board has gone through, the training that existing staff, do we have our new staff go through all of that training as well?
Yes, that new platform, like that security awareness training, unfortunately, we tried something new. I really like the trainings, but in terms of how it's delivered, this is our first time doing it second year, and it looks like there isn't a great way to space it out for new staff, so they might get like 5 or 6 5-minute videos to watch all at once, but they can complete them at their leisure. So normally we space it out, like we try to do one training on each PD day, which is less of a load for classroom teachers that have to worry about training. It stresses them out when they're trying to, teach kids. That's what they're supposed to do, and all of a sudden they get a bunch of these online trainings to do. So we tried to space those out, which is manageable, except for the new people that are coming on board that I would get them all at once, or new employees. Again, it's something we evaluate. If we find something better or a better way to do it, we'll change it. So we got one more year with this, and if we think we want to do something different, we'll switch it up.
Thank you.
This is such critical work, and when we talk about preparing our students to be successful in the workforce, wherever they choose to go, corporations continue to talk about digital literacy. So I appreciate the digital citizenship work that we're doing in the buildings. Thank you, Brian. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, moving on to our next agenda item. It's agenda item 12, future meetings, dates, and times. For school board meetings, we have our next school board meeting on September 9th. We have our regular board meeting also on October 14th. And as a reminder to everyone on the board, we have our budget hearing on October 28th. That will be at 5:30 p.m., so please note that. And then a special board meeting at 6 p.m. We have our Ed Services Committee, as a reminder, first Monday of every month at 5:30, and our Business Services and HR Committee meeting the first Monday of the month at 6:30.
I have a question.
Sure.
We had talked about potentially having a second board retreat in the month of August. You had said that one time.
November.
Oh, in November. We
November.
switched that to, okay.
Good question. So I think we can work on landing on a date, just given that's a busy time for most, so at least we can get it on the calendar. Thank you for reminding us.
Thank you, Alex.
Yes, Jim.
Did we modify the days for
September.
committee meetings in September?
Labor Day.
Yes.
Because it says first Monday, but I believe, are we doing them on Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Okay,
Tuesday,
thank you for that.
yes,
So that
because
would
of Labor
be
Day?
After Labor Day.
Tuesday, September 3rd. Okay, thank you for calling that out.
Good catch.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks for that flag. Okay, we are moving on to agenda item 13. Enter into closed session. This is this is 19.85, paren 1, paren E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business. Whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, specifically consider a listing price and baseline for sale of district-owned property. And 19.85, paren 1, paren C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee, specifically elementary principal contract.
I make a motion to go into closed session.
Okay, motion made by Alex.
Second.
Second by G. Lynette, can we please have a roll call vote?
Okay. Mr. Polk,
Yes.
Mr. Shetter,
Here, aye, sorry.
How are you?
Doing good, sorry.
It's not that late yet.
Mr. Summers,
Yes.
Mr. Kowalski,
Aye.
Ms. Portson,
Yes.
Mr. Rabi,
Yes.
Ms. Earler,
Yes.
Mr. Leacock,
Yes.
and Ms. Bushman.
Yes. All right, thank you. Yes, let's take
Let's
a,
go right in, it's up to you.
do you guys need a 5-minute bio break?
No.
No,
No?
just need
Okay.
to shut the room down.
Sure.